What's up, dudes? Max here, back in the second day of E3 and the fighting game apocalypse, because if there's a whole bunch now, there's going to be a whole bunch later. And one of the bigger ones of the show, obviously, is Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. However, this wasn't the first time I had the chance to play the game, because before the show even started, we were broadcasting and showing off the story mode demo, which briefly highlights the story mode that's going to be in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and I wasn't super thrilled with it. If anyone was watching that live stream, we did play quite a bit of Marvel Infinite, mostly just looking for mechanical stuff, trying to figure things out. I put up my first playthrough of it, which is the first time we had ever touched the game, and really got our hands on the mechanics to see how it actually works, and some of it was pretty exciting. However, the big focus of that story mode, while we were trying to get as much gameplay in, was really around the cinematics and the characters and the interactions, which weren't really jiving with us, because the characters either look kind of off or weird in the face, and a lot of the general character interactions just felt a little forced in some regard. The demo itself doesn't really give you that much of an opportunity to play a lot of the game because it's in such small bursts, so I understand what they're going for. They're trying to appeal towards the casual audience, but at the same time, I feel like I should really love a Marvel vs. Capcom story mode, and it wasn't really jiving with me based on that demo. So with that being said, I was looking forward to getting to E3 and actually playing the 1 vs. 1 demo of the game, where you can pick a variety of characters and actually fight against each other. Now, I do want to make a quick disclaimer and kind of address something that is needing to be said before I make a review of what I played with this game, and it's that I'm completely aware of the situation that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is in, the way it's being perceived over the internet and by people that are actively waiting for information and seeing how things look and how things are just looking very off with character faces and overall graphics and stuff of that nature. And right now, it can be pretty difficult to give any praise to this game without people jumping down your throat. The Marvel vs. Capcom series is honestly my favorite fighting game series. While it might not be one of my favorite initial or individual fighting games, the series itself, beginning with X-Men Children of the Atom and like X-Men vs. Street Fighter, going all the way to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, is literally dream material for me, because X-Men vs. Street Fighter was impossible back in the day, and the Marvel vs. Capcom series has always represented that, the impossible. But I also personally feel that it's impossible to deny that the launch roster for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is probably the least interesting of many of the Marvel vs. Capcom rosters, as well as some of the presentation, including the overall art style. I definitely wouldn't have gone with that if it was my choice. With all that being said, I want to be honest with you guys with the chance and time I did have playing this game at E3, because some stuff is definitely left to be desired in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and some other stuff, which I finally got the chance to put my hands on in terms of real hard game time, is pretty awesome. And that awesome stuff boils down to the game itself, because Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, its new mechanics, the tag system, the gem system, was incredibly fun. There are several characters that are making returning appearances from previous games, but things have been changed kind of dramatically with those characters. Of course, things like animations and the character models have been slightly modified and tweaked, but the overall way they play is a little bit different. Sometimes for the worse, because they have removed moves from some characters, and then sometimes for the better, because a lot of moves that weren't good before are way better now, and a lot of stuff that you did before doesn't work now, and you kind of have to recondition your brain of how to play those returning characters. I will also like to mention that that gameplay demo that was released to everybody for the story mode is a bit rough looking, and I don't think paints a very good impression of the game, especially considering that when we got to the show and I was looking at the exact same stages and new stages and other characters fighting each other, essentially the game and its actual combat presence, when you see everything happening and all the mechanics and all the action, it really looks pretty damn cool. And I don't think it's a bad looking game. It's only when you get close in on the character models and you start zooming in on their faces, you're reminded of how kind of ugly some of the stuff can look, while other characters look pretty friggin' awesome, including Strider, which I'm very happy about, Captain Marvel, who has looked great ever since the very first trailer they released of the game, and eventually Black Panther, which I think is an awesome looking design and is quickly becoming one of my favorite looking characters in the entire roster right now. I think that story demo of the game boils down to just being an older version, which I was hearing from quite a few people off and on, and the newer version of the game, which is the 1v1 demo at E3, just looked a bit better, so there is a little bit of reassurance that the game is going to look better than it does in the story mode demo, but at the same time, is some of the stuff that a lot of people are complaining about, like Chun-Li's face and Dante looking like Dino from Devil May Cry. I don't think that stuff is really going to get changed. However, the game itself looks pretty good when it's in motion, and I can very reassuredly tell you it's fun. The combat system now is unlike anything in any Marvel vs. Capcom game before, and the example I keep feeling whenever I was playing the game, and it gives you the chance to tag in, use gems almost at any point, activate them for its quote-unquote comeback factor that's kind of in the game, leaves your brain in a situation where you're just trying to think of all the crazy bullshit you can do with all these mechanics, because it does leave a very open environment to the player, which is what I was very much worried about when they were talking about accessibility in Marvel vs. Capcom. They do have, obviously, that one-punch button, which leads into an auto-air combo, but just based on the early impressions I had of the game, it took me a while to figure out how to do that square, 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 light attack, repeat auto combo. But within probably less than 30 minutes, I found something already immediately better that was with the character I was using, so that auto combo, while it's kind of okay, is obviously not great, and you can get a lot more damage as a result. That accessibility factor, having the auto combo be there for rapidly pressing the jab button, I actually really dislike, because that means you can't rapid fire jabs with some characters and they automatically start going for combos. So thank God you can turn that thing off in the menu, because it would be really annoying if you couldn't, and I generally probably won't recommend a lot of people that want to learn the combos in the game to use the auto combo at all, simply because the damage is okay and you can probably do a lot better much quicker. There are moments in previous Marvel vs. Capcom games that you try to force your opponent into making a really difficult decision. There's moments in fighting games where you kind of ask yourself or ask someone around you, how the hell do I block that? And usually the answer in Marvel vs. Capcom titles is, you don't. Really, you're just not supposed to be there. Avoiding that situation is actually the best defense instead of blocking a lot of the time in these games, simply because they are so difficult to block you cannot react to it. And like I was saying, it takes quite a while to set up for situations like that, and a lot of experience to eventually understand I need to put my opponent into a position where they have to make a hard guess as far as where the hell I'm going to attack from. And this game puts it on the surface level. In Ultimate Marvel 3 or Marvel 3, you have to send out a team hyper combo that has Amaterasu. She fills the screen with a whole bunch of projectiles while you go in and try to throw them or get damage. Essentially, you're locked down from the super while you send in a character. This wasn't immediately discovered in the game. It ended up being a high-level tactic later on, and is really one of the craziest things you can do with that team, because not all characters have access to insane stuff like that in a game like Ultimate Marvel 3, which is full of insane stuff. And Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite has it on the surface level. At any point, you can tag in your character regardless if your team member is doing a super, doing a special, throwing out their gem usage, engaging in the entire gem activation Infinity Storm period, where there's a ton of crazy stuff going on the left, coming on the right, you know what the heck is going on. You can engage in situations like that make it ridiculously difficult for your opposition to block at any point, giving the early impression that opening someone up in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is kind of going to be on surface level because of how much crazy stuff you can do with the mechanics of the game. And depending on what kind of a player you are, whether or not you like searching for that stuff or having it on a surface level, that can either be a compliment or a very big negative for some people that are kind of worried about the tournament viability of the game or something like that, because people are just going to be getting blown up by stuff left and right. For me personally, I find the mechanics ridiculously fun to use. The fact that you can tag anywhere, bring in your character, like I said, leaves me reeling in my head with the possibilities I can do with Strider, to shoot this fireball there, to lock them down, to bring in Mega Man X, to throw a projectile, to bring in Strider again. It feels like you always have access to something kind of insane that you can do with your team, and the moments I was losing most of my matches, I wasn't taking advantage of that stuff. I know some of you guys want me to grill this game, and some people are already going to be accusing me of being a shill and being sold out and everything like that, but I cannot lie to you and say I wasn't enjoying my time playing Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. even with the way a lot of characters looked. When the gameplay got started and you were fighting and engaged and trying to figure out all this stuff actively, it is extremely fun, and it is a huge change from the style of Marvel vs. Capcom we know before. Really, a lot of the matches were lasting an entire length similar to a 3 vs. 3 game, simply because you can tag your partner out so easily they recover life in the back almost with no effort. So the tag function, you're able to make your character safe almost at any given point. Sure, we're going to learn more and crazy ways to abuse the system and find ways around it and punish people more harshly, but on a surface level, what they've actually made is something that is very Marvel-like, that gives you access to the insane things that are in the other games at a surface level. The Infinity Stones are also a huge change because they all feel ridiculously broken right now, which is very, very fitting for a Marvel vs. Capcom game. All of these things do crazy stuff like launching them into walls, giving you huge damage boosts, allowing your characters to air dash, and throwing out homing projectiles. All of them seem broken in some way, especially some that lock your character into a cube. I think these were more designed around fun right now, and I kind of appreciate that because really the gems do actively feel like something of a groove system from previous Capcom titles. It definitely changes the way you play your characters, it's going to change all of your setups, and it's really going to make you think differently about how you address team mechanics. And that's exactly what the gem system should be doing, so they completely nailed it in that regard. They've also made some interesting changes to the advancing guard mechanic. If you time an advancing guard very well, or within a few frames of you getting hit by like a projectile, like a Morrigan projectile, you'll actually reflect it back at the opponent. This counts for the majority of projectiles in the game, according to the Capcom developers, but some stuff like beams and other minor projectiles like Chris's Magnum, they said you cannot reflect. But for the most part, a lot of the screen-filling stuff you can direct back at your opposition if they're doing a little bit too much keep away, and I appreciate that because it ended up being very powerful in the previous game. While Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite does resemble Ultimate Marvel 3 quite a bit in terms of its character roster, how they look and move, and the supers they're performing, because a lot of them are reused animations from the previous game, which of course I wish they were brand new and had completely different looks and had a different art style, and a lot of things I wish could be different about the game. I can absolutely tell you that the mechanics and the gameplay itself and using those characters is extremely fun. It's possibly some of the most fun I've had with a Capcom fighting game in quite some time, just discovering the possibilities that you can actually come up with, especially considering the fact that Marvel vs. Capcom usually is not about control, and Street Fighter V was about control. It was about them controlling the game for an esports style environment where they don't let things get too out of control, so they can tone it down and bring it to a certain level that allows you to sort of adjust the characters. I don't really agree with that way of designing a fighting game. I think fun should be the focus first, and then you start designing the game around the fun in order to make it balanced. I prefer characters in fighting games. They should all be insane, have access to ridiculous things, because you feel powerful. Every character feels powerful in that regard, and right now, based on the brief impressions I've had with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, it's hard to tell if the characters are ridiculously good, or if it's the person that's using the mechanics to their fullest to take advantage of all the ridiculous situations the game sets up. Of course, the things that I hope would change about the game that probably won't are its overall art style, as well as several character models and faces. I think a lot of that stuff is very surface level, and that's what a lot of people look at when it comes to fighting games. Fighting games need to look good, dude. They have to appeal to people because some people want to get in it for the mechanics, and some people want to see their characters looking awesome and doing awesome stuff. I tried to communicate this to as many people as possible that work at Marvel, that work at Capcom. I will say that these people that work on either side are very receptive about this stuff. All of them were asking about my personal opinion regarding the game, and to everyone that asked that has worked on the game or not worked on the game regardless, I said the exact same thing, which is that the visuals of the game are leaving a little bit to be desired, especially the character models and art style, but the gameplay is ridiculously fun and is where the game shines the most. We're pretty close to release of this game, with it showing up in just under 3 months at the beginning of September. I only hope the feedback that we have given them, and a lot of people, and the outcry from the internet about the faces and everything like that, can be addressed in some way. I'm hoping for the best, simply because the game is so much fun. I don't want just the characters I like to look cool. I want the characters everyone else plays to look cool as well. I want the characters that I've wanted in Marvel vs. Capcom games that haven't gotten the chance to eventually show up in the game, especially considering the core roster leaves a lot to be desired, especially on that Marvel side. This game desperately needs some X-Men characters. It desperately needs some Marvel legacy characters that help build Marvel vs. Capcom is to what it is today. And I do absolutely know that Marvel is a much different company, their focuses are in different directions, and the characters they're choosing are obviously tailored towards a very specific brand that they're creating now. I understand that completely. I only hope that they come out and start announcing other characters that will be available, that are legacy characters, that are from previous games, and are overall extremely popular. That's what a lot of people really want. Hopefully there are some surprises around the corner in terms of the roster of the game. Zero was not a character that was mentioned on very many of the leak lists that were out there, so there might possibly be some surprises around the corner. Although, considering that everything else is kind of tying all together with the other characters like Gamora, who hadn't showed up, and Thanos and Dante, who is showing up now, who were on the leak lists, there's a small glimmer of hope. To close this thing out, Marvel vs. Capcom, for the first time in a very long time, has a direct competitor that has shown up at the show and is impressing a lot of people, which is Dragon Ball FighterZ. And that game is undeniably awesome, but it is not much of a game yet, and according to the developers, is only 20% finished, so it's only going to get better, and I feel that's a good thing. I feel that competition is great for this industry, and in the end will always result in one product trying very hard to overcome the other product. And whether or not that's going to be Marvel vs. Capcom getting updates to change and address a lot of the things people have issues with art-wise, or it's going to be Dragon Ball Infinite to add a whole bunch of ridiculous characters to kind of fill in the roster similar to a size of a Marvel vs. Capcom game, including a story mode, which Marvel vs. Capcom has as well, that's going to be up to the developers. And that's a good thing, because these tag team fighting games, there's not a lot of them anymore, like I was mentioning before, and now there's two huge ones that are coming out not that long from now. I'm still going to be making coverage of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I'm still going to be talking about the characters that are released to the game, releasing reaction videos, and I'm going to be giving you guys my 100% honest opinion. And like I said earlier, here on YouTube and Twitch, you guys have supported myself and the projects we make so much that I do not have to alter my opinion in some way. I truly feel the things I said in this video, and I truly mean the things I say about the other fighting games on this channel, whether or not things are exciting, if I'm having fun with them, and being able to share that opinion with what I feel in the moment, regardless of how sad it makes me, or angry, or excited, or ridiculously happy, is something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. Either way, if there's any more opportunities to play Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, I'll be jumping on them as soon as possible until the eventual release date in September. Thank you dudes a ton for watching. My name is Max, and I'll see you next time.